All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Johannes Birringer, and I welcome our audience to the third edition of our performance research seminar series this fall at Brunel University in London. We started a bit late in October, and we are running now into the winter time, where I think some changes will happen at our university, which I'm looking forward to. But at the moment, we are in a sort of a very new situation where our speakers, our guests, guest artists and scholars cannot come physically into our drama studio, but we have to introduce our guests through the Zoom. So I'm very, very excited to welcome Kirstine Lindemann as our guest today. I had
Thank you.
actually prepared, let me see whether I can show our audience a very quick image from your website. Over the image of you, there is sound, body, space. And I guess in my very brief introduction, I was going to mention that I met Kirstine previously also here on campus, and then we had a few meetings in London. And I was terribly intrigued by her musicianship, performanceship as a sort of performer that works with the body as well as with instruments, but also sees her body as an instrument, as a sound generating and expressive instrument. And so that attracted my attention. And I think those years back when you came, you had a piece on breath, yeah, and on breathing. But you have an amazing career as a composer, as a performer, as a musician, and as someone who's done research. You recently, I believe, completed a postgraduate degree in Denmark, and you have performed internationally. You are also working with others, of course. I think one of the videos that you showed me was with a Chinese performer, and that was the Other Eye work that we might talk about later. And then you wrote me that you are at the moment working on revising or recreating an earlier piece called Further and Back. And the title for today's visit, I made it up because of your recent performances. One was the string piece, so we took the strings, and then was the Robin Hood piece, yeah, with
Yeah.
with the Folketheatret in Copenhagen. And I, of course, hope that you can talk a little bit about some of these pieces. But maybe in the beginning, my first question is, maybe just introduce yourself in the way you understand body instrument. What does this mean in your understanding?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. And for the question, what does instrument and body mean to me? I think it's been a very gradual development for me, starting out as an instrumentalist, playing recorder for many years, and gradually finding out that this physicality of playing actually had many more dimensions to it, and figuring out how this physicality would link or connect to an audience and to the whole stage situation. And I somehow developed from being an instrumentalist to figuring out that music for me, or being in a performance situation, I don't need an instrument to be there in that communicative space.
Fascinating. And Kirstine, when we are doing our seminar today, do you mind if I sometimes just come in and interrupt or speak like as if we were having a conversation? Is that okay?
No, please interrupt.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, because it's not a formal lecture, and I didn't ask you to prepare long and complex, interpretation of your work. I really feel we should spontaneously just chat. So what you just said reminded me of something I read many years ago. I think it was one of the early 20th century German expressionist dancers, Mary Wickmann, who said every human is a dancer. And I think she was in a way referring to the body as her main instruments. And so when you mentioned this idea, I had to think of dance, but I also thought, well, a musical instrument, when you train and practice it for a long time, becomes a virtuoso thing, but so are the gestures that you're using to play an instrument, right? And maybe you were thinking also in terms of the hands or the whole body, the kinetics of the whole body becoming involved in performance. And therefore, maybe you could put aside the recorder and do something, maybe, I don't know, with your voice, with your breath, with your arms, with your legs. Tell us about how you became a performance artist. In that sense. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I see myself as a performance artist, but at least I see myself as a performing artist.
Okay.
Well, I don't really have a clear recipe for that, how it all happened. It's just growing out of following an interest and finding out, slowly also building a sort of feel for what feels right and what works. I think some moments that really meant a lot to me was first taking the decision that it's okay to be on stage without an instrument, and then also somehow coming to terms with the fact that I'm not a dancer, I'm not a choreographer, but I am someone who deals with movement in a musical way, and that is the.
I see. This is perhaps
somehow
interesting distinction, perhaps coming from music, and perhaps I don't know, you must have been trained in composition and also, of course, in reading score and playing with orchestras or with other instrumentalists. So in a way, perhaps you began to compose with the body or with physical presence. And then maybe also, I don't know, you must have thought of using other kinds of objects as instruments, perhaps, in the stage, yeah?
I think actually I find it funny to talk about my way into what I call composition, because it came from being an instrumentalist, playing other people's music, into starting to work physically with body, being more engaged as a performer, and that way figuring out that this was my way to start making my own music. So I somehow had a very very long and curved route. And I call it music because that's where I come from, and that's my basic somehow coding.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And I think when you came first to visit us a few years ago, that was a piece that dealt with breath and breathing. Do you remember what you were trying to discover in that project?
Yes, first the very initiate considerations was that I was interested in working with a parameter that could somehow focus or dive into a common connection between a physical, visual expression and something that had musical parameters such as pitch and rhythm, pulse, all those parts in one concept, which was the breath. Then when I started to develop this research, I figured out that, or I was just super intrigued by the fact that we also connect on a very, for me at least, very basic human level through this breath. And I discovered when I would show performances with this project that people would copy me across stage in a very extreme manner. So if I would breathe super fast, I would see all the audience members also. Or if I would jump, they would go jumping in the seats. And I thought, I just thought that was so interesting. And that made me want to dive deeper into this whole question of physicality and music and how that makes us connect in a way.
Beautiful. I can't help sometimes when I listen to make strange associations. So if I ever say something very strange, then just I remember being invited to a workshop in Norway, in Trondheim, and they wanted me to talk about my interest in technology. And I don't know, I didn't know how to begin. And so I showed them an old mosaic that had been rediscovered in Italy from Roman times. And it's called the Tomb Diver. And it shows a person who seems to be jumping off a springboard down what looks like it could be the earth or the sea, but maybe he's jumping into their tomb. Yeah. And I thought this is a wonderful thing, because at the time, when I was working with the students there, everyone was asking me about virtual technology and VR and augmented reality. And I don't know, we're living in a pandemic now where that kind of relationality, that breathing together with the audience is not so much possible. Yeah. And it's incredibly sad, because what you just evoked is a sense of how bodies connect, right? Am I understanding you? How
Yes.
breathing or how rhythm or how motion brings the energy across, yeah, from stage to audience, or perhaps even just in the venue, in the space. So were you thinking of this relation in terms of your performance as something that you could explore?
Yes, definitely. It was something I discovered in the very first stages of this project, and then I started to experiment more in this direction, which parameters do we need to have this transfer of first it's a movement, but I believe it's also a transfer of emotions and feelings. I also got somehow a little bit scared from it, because I thought it's such a strong manipulative tool to, for example, I know that actors also use this trick to evoke certain feelings. They provoke their breath to go to certain extremes. So a very classic example would be to be scared. They would put the breath super high and breathe very fast and wait for the motion to take them to a certain state. And I thought suddenly, oh my God, if I can make a whole audience sit and breathe like that, what a power somehow.
Wonderful. You have been spying on actors. I must admit, I don't know so much about how actors manipulate perhaps emotions or themselves, but it's a very interesting topic, the whole question of breathing, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you have a scene in one of your performances on breath where you had a plastic bag over your face? And
Yeah.
the the inability to breathe, or asphyxiation, or the difficulty of breathing, if you now think about COVID-19 and how it affects the lungs, it's a very deep, I think, and frightening thing to also think about. The not being able to have enough air, yeah. And yet how the breath is so important for the human voice, right? I was going to say to you, you have this piece Further and Back. When I saw the older instrumentalist version, I remember seeing you with was it a bass recorder? Or yeah, a cellist and a violinist. But I think a little bit you could also hear how the voices were coming into this very repetitive type of composition. And you said to me that you are preparing, and can you talk about that? A new version just for voices? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, this piece is quite old. I wrote it first for 2 flutes for myself and a companion. And we were working with voice and the sound of the flute and the combination of these two.
Oh,
and then
voice.
later I made a new version.
I see.
And of course, with flute or recorder, it's easy because you can have the instrument close by and breathe out. You can sing and sing in the instrument and make all these combinations in between. Then I made this version number 2, which is what you saw from this summer for a violist and a cellist here in Copenhagen. And I tested whether it would be possible to combine using breath and having string instrument and finding sounds that could somehow match this sound field. Then we did, just for fun, for learning the piece, we did voice versions to learn the rhythms. And I suddenly realized that this was supposed to be for voice.
I see. Can you say a few words about the complex structure of this piece? I remember you mentioned the numbers, and then how, and I was going to say something to you. Let me just say it first. The other day, I was doing some digging in the archive, and I had remembered that there was a piece I once saw, a video piece by an United States American woman artist. Her name is Nancy Holt. It was called Boomerang. And all she does is she's in a kind of a radio booth. She's speaking into a microphone and her own voice comes back with a 2-second delay. And she keeps talking, and then her consciousness gets more and more confused because of the echo coming back of her own voice. And so when I read your description of Further and Back, I thought, well, maybe what you're doing there is a bit similar, that the repetitive structure, when it gets out of line, becomes confused, chaotic.
Yes, I think it's a very, very good parallel. In the piece, the performers are supposed to repeat the first note of the piece, the second note, and the third note, and so forth. But after a while, the performers inevitably they forget if they reach number 17 or number 19, and then the performers are supposed to stick to their own mistake. And that's when the piece goes from unisono to unfolding into a somehow very strange, chaotic, you call it, canon. And the only thing is that the performer should always stay in the same pulse, but the accents of the pulse will always move depending on which notes you repeat it. The most difficult about performing this piece is not learning the notes, but the most difficult is to stay in the pulse when suddenly your fellow performers start to fall out of grid, and suddenly the whole ground around you is shaking. Because you don't know when they will make a mistake. And that is that's the hard part, I'd say. Yeah.
Fascinating. Let me ask you, since we have about an hour to spend, had you prepared to show us something, or should we simply make a little click and go into the share function and maybe show a minute from the 2015 version? Would you like me to bring it up?
You can show it, yes, of course.
I mean, if you let me to, I have it right underneath here. Let me see where I have it now. And then we can have our audience listen in a little bit. So now I need to go into the share, 1 second, and then maybe we'll listen for a little bit, yeah? And if you want to speak over it, you can also do that. So I'm now going into sharing this screen. Can you see it?
I can see it.
And then let's go.
Yes. So there we had the first mistake already.
Good.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I suddenly felt not comfortable stopping it. So I thought, let's play it through. And it also was actually exciting to see the physicality of the performance. And also, let me ask you, is it exhausting, in fact, to work that hard with the breath?
Yes.
It is.
Usually what I tell people that perform it is first that you can't make mistake. You should make mistake, or how to say it, that mistakes are great. And then that the most hard thing next to keeping the pulse when you make mistakes is to keep up the stamina, to keep up the energy. There is a small soft part in the middle that should be soft, but then for the rest it should be like I think of it as a sort of powerful animal with a lot of legs and arms.
Oh, like an
going.
octopus.
Wow. Something like that.
Wonderful. I like this comparison because it's almost an animal force, right?
Yeah. And I think using the breath here, it brings out this very sort of, I call it basic, but I think that's the wrong term, but sort of primal animal feel. Yeah. Which I somehow can connect to in some way.
Very interesting. I mean, and you, I think you are in the center. You are I think the most vivid presence in this company. Whoops! It started already playing. I was going to make a radical transition now, even though it's because I hear the strings in the background. So yes, let me bring up.
But I thought just before we skip to something else, I thought in the meantime, when we were listening to the piece, I found this. Now it's not a shared screen, but do you see
the score?
Yes, which maybe you don't see it. Maybe
yes, we can see it very well.
Okay, so I thought it's just it's nice to see what it actually looks like, because it sounds very chaotic, and when you look at it, it looks like a children's drawing. And people always think it's very easy to play, and then they figure out about the numbers, and then suddenly it's not so easy. Yeah.
Well, that was very helpful, and in fact, now you mentioned something that we could also briefly address. You said earlier when you arrived for our meeting that you had been performing to children today, and also I think in the summer you were commissioned to work with a theater in Copenhagen on a musical, Robin Hood. Yeah, how did that go? And was there any link, or is no link between the children's performances and Robin Hood, or is there?
There is a link in the sense that I am also performing in both shows. In Robin Hood, it's actually a theater show, but with a lot of music. And we are 3 musicians who also composed the music, and we are also performing. We are part of the whole Sherwood gang. So we are basically on stage all the time and in costumes, which is also the case in my children's performance. In this project, it's a project that I developed with a colleague, and we are miming the music together with the music. So we are moving and we tell a little story along with playing. And all the the whole sort of narrative or actions that happen are based on what happens in the music. So for example, we play sonatas, we play Baroque music for kids. and all the movement material is based on what the music says. So, for example, you have moments you work with a term called dux comes, which means leader and follower. And if that happens in the music, we re-establish this relation in the sense of movement material. And yes, we sort of used the music as a way to create a narrative. Yeah.
Dux, the Latin word for leading? Ah.
Yes.
Interesting. And when you say miming the music, you mean you do it with the voice or with body language?
With body language. We actually, there's one scene where we call it the radio scene, and we have we are having a game where I suddenly transform into a radio. So I talk in that scene because I'm a radio, but in the rest of the play, nobody talks. It's only music and gesture. Yes.
How old are the children?
They are for the first 3 grades in primary school. So they are between 6 and 10.
Oh, wonderful.
And actually, I wanted to tie a comment to this experience to something you said earlier about this way of connecting physically with an audience and how we transfer emotion through this connection. I'm sure you have many of examples of that from your own work too. It struck me in some of the performances we've done this week, because first of all, I think it was yesterday we performed for a group of children, and afterwards one of the teachers came to me and she said, "Oh, I was so worried if they were going to be able to understand and connect, because actually now all the conflicts we have at the school is about the kids not being able to read each other's body language." And I said, that's funny. How can that be? And
you
she
mean
said,
because
well,
of the mask? Because of the mask?
No, because in school they don't wear masks. I think it's a more general picture or idea. And she said that she thought it's because we connect so much through digital media, and so much goes through just reading from a screen, and we don't have the same. I just concluded we don't have the same way of copying and transferring emotion through a screen than from the real physical meeting, and that weakens this sense.
I see. This is fascinating because you're addressing a deep subject of somatic sensory exchange, awareness, orientation, because we read people. We also, this is again maybe an animal part of us, when we feel fearful or aware of some danger, yeah, our body shows certain reactions, and we're also reading the other people we are engaging with, how close they are, whether we can smell their breath or their body odor, or their feel their presence. So that's a very powerful thing that your teacher colleague mentioned that. And like children, I also imagine if they are growing up in a city with digital social media, they may not remember what a cow looks like, yeah? I sometimes ask my students if they know certain animals, they don't have a clue, yeah?
Yes.
You know, that's silly, but wonderful examples of your work. And with the Robin Hood, was that meant to be for a general audience, musical audience, or also for younger audiences?
It's made basically mostly for families, and
for
then
families.
sometimes we had schools visiting the theater.
The name of the theater sounds like it specializes in folk art, or no, that's not true.
It means more like
Volkstheater. Volkstheater. What would that be in Germany? Because Volkstheater usually plays also drama. They show drama.
Yes, they do here too. It's not specialized in music or music theater. It's more like it's a very, very old theater. I think it had one of the first performances in 1850s.
Oh,
So
monarchies, and well, you still are a monarchy, right?
yeah.
And the costumes looked wonderfully elaborate and
Yes.
beautiful, yeah. I can't see you really going into a musical career, but this must have been interesting because you were performing, you know, right on stage.
Yeah, and it was nice to see how it works on such a theater and to experience a theater director and his expectations for the music and to experience this context. And of course, it's a very big theater which is very rooted in the Danish population. So many people come there, and that's always, especially in these times, just very wonderful.
So you actually are moving really in between, you could say, different contexts, because I also imagine you performing in alternative spaces and at music festivals, and you won awards for your work in fringe festivals or in experimental, sonic arts festivals. So maybe in the last part of our conversation, talk a little bit about your experimental work, let's say, other eye, and also maybe if you want to a quick look at strings. I think there's also a brief video of the other eye, because our audience might like to see how you utilize the camera and video in that piece. So talk a little bit about your collaboration on Other Eye.
Well, Other Eye is a duo I have with a Chinese composer and performer. She's called Yiran Jiao, and she's based in Germany. And we started working together in 2018. And the piece Other Eye, which is now our duo name, was also our first work together. And we developed the piece from not really knowing each other and figuring out what we thought would be interesting to work on, and then well, basically this whole talk about how our collaboration works also taps into talk about how I develop work, which is a very hands-on experience. And in this case, we also just met and tested different objects. We wanted to see what can we work with, where is there something hidden that we feel we could build on. And we also, of course, had lots of conversations, and among the things that we were both occupied with, next to a body in space, which is for both of us very like a sort of central thing, we were also interested in the act of observing and being observed, and how this also works in a performance setting with an audience. And we started to test different magnifying glasses. I found one by accident and I put it on my eye, and Hidon said, "Wow, that looks so funny." No, wait, it was not a magnifying glass. First, it was just we were at a cafe and I put water glasses on my eyes, and she saw the bottom was very thick, so my eyes became super big. And then we went to test different kinds of magnifying glasses.
Let me see whether we can show the audience a glimpse. I don't know,
Yes.
there's probably different versions, but let's just run this one a little bit.
Yes. This is from our first live performance in Darmstadt.
Aha.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. And again, stunning the way I think the physicality works on camera and what you're doing there. Beautiful. Let me see, make sure that I close the window. You also are creating this infinity effect, right? Because the camera is seeing also the initial camera, and you're multiplying, and it's quite a Hitchcockian performance. Ghostly. I mean, how do you feel about it now in retrospect? I mean, what did you find most interesting about it? Can you see what is created behind you, or do you just perform to the camera?
We just perform to the camera. We have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, we do have an idea, but we can't see ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes. So we just have to, we have to rehearse, and then in performance hope for the best. Well, I think this work is just a very, it was a very beautiful way to get to know Yiran and to work together, because we managed to join our forces in a very strong, in a way that we could both shine and lift the work. I know that you and I have also had many conversations about creative collaborations, which is always it can be tricky and always also very beautiful.
Is there a wordplay in when other I, the other? Is it also about the I as a self, as a subject?
Of course, we play with the identity. We look different. One is Chinese, one is European, but we wear the same clothes, and there's this whole reproduction of some humans that could be. It looks like me, but it also moves with latency. So maybe it's someone else, or maybe it's someone from the past, or what do I know?
Oh, you
Yeah.
just used a very interesting term, because I remember when we started working in network performance and connecting to others, the technician or the technically minded people always worried about the latency, and that there would be a delay that would prevent us to be performing together properly. And I always said, oh, that's okay, you know,
Okay.
slightly out of sync, it's okay.
Well, I think it's maybe it's just condition of living. We're always a bit with latency. Yeah. But
well, Christina, so the last video I have here on the back burner, I also find it visually so beautiful, is the string performance. Let me see whether I can bring it up. And maybe, I know you've done research, and of course you are probably very knowledgeable about sonic art, or you must have looked at sonic art and the history of experimental performance. So tell us how strings came about, or it's still in development, right? It will be
yes,
next year. Whoops, that's what.
Yes. Well, just now I finished the installation. It was supposed to have been performed in Stuttgart with Neue Vokalsolisten next week, but because I cannot go, it will have to wait. The whole idea actually came about from another collaboration I am starting. I was asked by a quartet based in Vienna if I wanted to compose something for them. And I was asked, together with another composer called Scott Rubin, to make something that could involve body. Should I keep talking, or should we?
I took the sound off for a moment so that you can introduce it, and then we'll bring the sound up.
Nice. Then I figured that I actually, well, now I just told that I am a instrumentalist who started to work with body in space. But actually, usually when I meet musicians who want to move, it's often quite awkward. So I thought I wanted to give them a spatial guideline for them to move, or something to divide the space for them. And then we started also to talk a lot about this connection between individuals, and we started to talk about webs in space. How could we create a web in space?
Or like a spider web, like some kind of webbing. Interesting.
With one of the first references I came to think of was Dogville, where he uses just
the chalk lines.
Yes.
To outline the village or the houses. Yes. This is Lars van Trier, for the audience who may not be familiar with this filmmaker, Danish filmmaker, and the piece is Dogville, which I think was a Brechtian kind of staging. Very beautiful.
Yes, and anyhow, then the idea of creating something that would divide space came around. And I started to work with amplifying strings. And now I will tell the rest afterwards.
Okay, let's listen a bit. down a little bit, maybe comment a bit more. It's very beautiful, and I don't know, I remember as a child, Christina, when I took piano lessons, I always wanted to open the lid and look inside and scratch the strings with my hands, yeah, because they made such a beautiful resonance sound. So you are touching these strings with your hands. And what are these buckets?
The installation has two different layers of amplification, and one is the acoustic amplification, which is in what we see here is the very, very first test version of the installation that I made last June. Now those buckets have been changed for drums and guitars that I rebuilt them. And that means that the installation has a spatial element. So if you are close to a certain resonant box, that box will amplify the string in a certain way. And then if you move to the other end of the string, the long strings here are 9.5 meters long. Then you will hear different frequencies being amplified. So that's one layer of the installation, the sort of acoustic amplification. And then there is what you hear most in this video is the electronic amplification, which consists of contact mics that are put on each string in one end, and then it goes through my computer and comes out. Yeah.
This is a particularly interesting visual moment for me, where I just watched the strings fluttering, yeah, and it's very beautiful the way you interact with the installation. Does it hurt the hands, or is it okay?
Well, it does hurt a little bit, and because I experimented first. When I first came up with the idea, I tested loads of different materials, how to create these strings. And I ended up with metal wire and hemp string and elastic band as the primary materials. And when you play especially the wire, you have to have some metal to strike the wire, otherwise your nails will disappear. Yeah.
Very exciting. We're coming to the last minute or two, so if you want to add something or find a way to conclude your research, because I see your artwork and your composition and your performances as a obviously research practice. Yeah, it's a form of research and investigation, and you seem to go in various directions, and it's very, very encouraging also for me to see that you have work, that you get invited, that you have ability to meet audiences, and hopefully next year you will have concerts again. So what are your visions for the future for yourself or for your collaborators?
Just now I am very excited about actually stepping back a little bit as a performer and seeing more of my work being performed and to compose more.
Oh, you mean by others? Performed by others?
Yes.
Oh, you are already moving into the next stage. All right.
Which is also the case with this installation, that I will not be performing in it. Well, in this video, this is just I am improvising in this installation, but in the end, I will make a piece for 4 instrumentalists that are playing instruments and playing the strings. So it's a sort of choreographic composition. So that's at least that's a dream that I am trying to fulfill these years. And then I think I found somehow my area of interest, which will never, well, we never know what will happen, but at least something that I see reoccurring, even if my span of genre and projects is very wide. It's always somehow based on sound and body in a space. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's
that makes sense. Sound and body and the world, being in the world. And you mentioned your search for specific materials. You were testing materials, this sense of working with materiality. And I'm sure you also can see how different spaces respond to sound. I remember there was an installation, I think, in Berlin in the summer when almost everything was closed, but two Austrian artists did something in one of the techno clubs where they basically just installed sound in this enormous old, industrial building. And when you walk into it, you experience the vibrations, you experience the resonances, with the walls and all that. So I think your career as a composer, performer, and installation artist and choreographer, because certainly if you are asking other people to step inside, that's what choreography asks too, And I want to bring us to a conclusion now. So I want to thank you for making the time to speak to me from Denmark, to us. And I wish you the very, very best for your future projects. Yeah. And I'm sure our paths will cross again.
I am sure too, Johannes. And I want to say, well, I already said thank you for having me, but also thank you for always throwing around so many wonderful references and inspirations. That has been a great gift to me. Yeah.
Well, I think dialogue is the most important in our field. As a researcher or as a teacher or as an artist, I want to learn from others, and then you give back by having a conversation. And when it's a performance, it's also, in a way, a conversation. So thank you and all the best to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Johannes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.